Long ago, beyond the misty mountains, there was a small and peaceful village. In a humble clay house lived a poor young boy named Keloğlan. He had no fine clothes, he owned no land, and there was rarely enough food on the table. But Keloğlan possessed something more valuable than gold. He had a kind and compassionate heart. Keloğlan lived with his elderly mother. Every day she spun wool and knitted warm socks by hand. One morning she placed several pairs inside a cloth bag. "My son," she said, "take these socks to the market. Sell them and buy some flour and oil. We have almost nothing left to eat." Keloğlan placed the bag over his shoulder. "Do not worry, mother," he said. "I will return before sunset." His mother smiled and watched him leave. Keloğlan followed the winding road toward the distant market. He did not yet know that this ordinary morning would change his life forever. The village market was crowded and noisy. Merchants called out from beneath canvas tents. Farmers carried baskets filled with fruit and vegetables. Children ran between the stalls. Keloğlan found a quiet place and carefully displayed the socks his mother had knitted. "Warm socks," he called. "Strong and warm socks." At first, people walked past without stopping. But Keloğlan did not lose hope. He smiled at every customer. He explained how carefully his mother had made each pair. An old farmer bought the first pair, then a woman chose 2 more. Before long, other customers gathered around him. By late afternoon, only 1 pair remained. A tired traveler approached and examined it. "These will keep my feet warm during the winter," the traveler said. He handed Keloğlan several coins. Keloğlan looked into his empty bag and smiled. Every pair had been sold. He counted the money carefully. There was enough to buy flour, oil, and perhaps even a little honey for his mother. Pleased with his success, Keloğlan began walking home. As Keloğlan left the market, he heard cruel laughter near the roadside. A group of boys had surrounded a small dog. The frightened animal was covered in dust. It tried to escape, but the boys blocked its path. One of them raised a stick. "Stop!" Keloğlan shouted. He stepped between the boys and the trembling dog. "Leave him alone!" The boys laughed. "Why do you care about this useless animal?" Keloğlan looked down at the dog. Its eyes were filled with fear. "He is not useless," Keloğlan replied. "He is alive, and he is frightened." The oldest boy held out his hand. "Give us some money, and you can take him." Keloğlan hesitated. The coins were meant for food. But he could not walk away. He placed several coins into the boy's palm. The boys left, laughing among themselves. Keloğlan knelt beside the dog. "You are safe now," he whispered. The little dog slowly wagged its tail, and when Keloğlan continued along the road, the dog followed faithfully behind him. A little farther down the road, Keloğlan saw an old merchant sitting beside a wooden stall. A cloth sack moved near the merchant's feet. From inside came a faint meow cry. Keloğlan stopped. "What is inside that sack?" The merchant opened it slightly. A frightened kitten stared out. "What will you do with her?" Keloğlan asked. "No one wants her," the merchant replied. "She steals food and frightens my chickens." Keloğlan looked at the coins remaining in his hand. He had already spent part of the money. Still, he could not leave the kitten trapped inside the sack. "I will take her," he said. The merchant named his price. Keloğlan handed over several more coins. The merchant released the kitten. At first, she crouched behind a basket. Then she slowly approached Keloğlan. He held out his hand. The kitten touched it with her nose. Soon, she was walking beside him and the little dog. Keloğlan now had very little money left, but his road home no longer felt lonely. The sun was beginning to set when Keloğlan reached the edge of the forest. There he found another crowd. Several villagers had trapped a large snake beneath a wooden basket. Some carried sticks, others held stones. "We must kill it before it bites someone," a man shouted. Keloğlan pushed through the crowd. The snake was wounded and exhausted. Its dark eyes met his. "Please," Keloğlan said, "let it go." The villagers laughed. "A dog and a cat were not enough for you? Now you wish to rescue a snake?" Keloğlan opened his hand. Only a few coins remained. They were the last of the money his mother had trusted him with. "Take these," he said. "Just let the snake live." The villagers accepted the coins and lifted the basket. The snake slowly moved toward the forest. Before disappearing among the trees, it turned back. Then, to Keloğlan's amazement, it spoke. "Your kindness will not be forgotten." And with those words, the snake vanished into the darkness. Keloğlan returned home with no flour and no oil. He told his mother everything that had happened. She listened quietly. Then she placed her hand upon his head. "We may go hungry tonight," she said, "but never regret showing mercy." The following morning, Keloğlan heard a soft sound outside the house. The snake was waiting near the door. "I am not an ordinary snake," it said. "I am the prince of the Kingdom of Serpents. My father wishes to reward the one who saved my life." Keloğlan followed the serpent deep into the forest. They traveled beyond familiar paths. They crossed a narrow stream and climbed between ancient rocks. At last they reached a great stone hidden beneath hanging vines. The serpent touched the stone with its head. The earth trembled. A deep crack opened across the rock. Behind it appeared a glowing passage. Keloğlan stepped inside. The passage descended far beneath the mountains. Waterfalls poured from black cliffs. Crystal pools reflected pale light. Hundreds of serpents watched silently from stone bridges and high terraces. None threatened him. Instead, they lowered their heads as the prince passed. Beyond the caverns stood an enormous underground city. Its towers rose between shining pillars of stone. Lanterns glowed along winding paths. At the center of the kingdom stood a great palace. Keloğlan followed the prince through its gates. Before him was a magnificent hall. Upon a stone throne rested the Serpent King. The Serpent King wore a crown of dark jewels. His enormous body circled the throne. Keloğlan bowed respectfully. "You saved my son," said the king. "For this I will grant you a reward." The king showed him chests filled with gold. There were pearls, emeralds, and precious stones. "Take whatever you desire." Keloğlan looked at the treasure. Then he shook his head. "I did not save your son for payment. I only wanted him to live." The great hall became silent. The Serpent King studied Keloğlan carefully. Then he smiled. "Because you ask for nothing, you deserve something greater than treasure." A small carved box was brought forward. The king opened it. Inside lay a round seal marked with the image of a serpent. A faint light shone from its surface. "This is the magical seal," said the king. "Hold it in your hands and make a sincere wish. If your heart is pure, the seal will answer. But remember this warning. Greed will weaken its power. Pride will turn its magic against its owner. And in the hands of the cruel, it will bring only emptiness." Keloğlan accepted the seal with both hands. He felt warmth move through his fingers. For a moment, he saw visions of green fields, flowing water, and happy families. He bowed once more. "I will remember your words." The Serpent Prince guided him back through the underground kingdom. At the entrance, the two friends said farewell. Keloğlan placed the magical seal safely inside his bag. Then he began the long journey home. When Keloğlan reached his village, the land was dry. The well was nearly empty. The crops had begun to wither. His mother waited inside their old house. Keloğlan took the seal into his hands. He closed his eyes. "Let my mother never go hungry again." The seal began to glow. In an instant, their empty shelves filled with bread, flour, and oil. But Keloğlan did not stop there. He walked to the center of the village. "Let there be enough water for everyone." The dry well rumbled. Clear water rose from the earth and overflowed its stone walls. The villagers cried out in wonder. Keloğlan lifted the seal again. "Let these fields become fertile." Rain clouds gathered above the mountains. Gentle rain fell upon the soil. Green shoots pushed through the ground. Trees blossomed. Vegetables grew large and healthy. The village barns filled with grain. Keloğlan helped the sick and the elderly. He repaired damaged homes. He made sure that no child went to bed hungry. But he never built a palace for himself. He continued to live with his mother. The dog slept beside the door. The cat rested near the warm stove. The villagers no longer called Keloğlan foolish. They now spoke of his kindness. News of the miracles traveled beyond the mountains. Eventually, it reached the royal palace. And there, a jealous vizier began to listen. The vizier was a powerful and ambitious man. When he heard about the magical seal, he desired it immediately. "With such power," he thought, "I could become greater than the king." He sent spies to the village. They watched Keloğlan from a distance. They saw him use the seal. They learned where he kept it at night. One evening, the vizier disguised himself as a traveling merchant. He arrived at Keloğlan's home, asking for shelter. Keloğlan welcomed him without suspicion. He shared his food with the stranger. When everyone had fallen asleep, the vizier rose quietly. He entered Keloğlan's room. The seal rested inside a small wooden box. The vizier took it and escaped into the night. He returned to his distant fortress. There he held the seal above his head. "Give me wealth beyond measure," he commanded. The seal glowed weakly. Treasure appeared around him, but the light soon faded. Back in the village, the wells began to dry. The flowers withered, and Keloğlan knew that the seal had been stolen. Keloğlan searched everywhere, but the thief had left no clear trail. The dog sniffed the empty wooden box. Then he ran toward the road. The cat followed close behind. They understood what had happened, and without waiting, the two loyal friends began their journey. They crossed fields and climbed rocky hills. They followed the vizier's scent through deep forests. When the road disappeared, the cat climbed trees to search from above. When they reached a raging river, the dog carried the cat across the water. Rain fell for 3 days. The animals sheltered beneath old stones. They shared what little food they could find. On the 4th day, they reached a steep mountain pass. The path was narrow and dangerous. Loose rocks fell beneath their feet, but neither animal turned back. At night, they followed the stars. During the day, they questioned birds and forest creatures. A small bird finally told them about a dark fortress beyond the eastern valley. The dog and the cat continued toward it. At last, they saw high stone walls rising through the mist. Guards stood at every gate. The seal was somewhere inside. The dog studied the entrance. The cat examined the walls. They would need courage. They would need patience. And most of all, they would need to trust each other. Under the light of the moon, the cat climbed the fortress wall. She slipped through a narrow window. The dog waited outside. Inside, the vizier sat alone with the seal. He had become obsessed with its power. The cat hid behind a curtain. When the vizier turned away, she leapt onto the table, but the seal fell to the floor. The vizier spun around. He reached for the cat. At that moment, the dog burst through the half-open door. He "Roo, roo," barked and knocked the vizier backwards. The cat seized the seal. The vizier called for his guards. The dog and cat ran through the corridors. They raced across the courtyard and slipped beneath the closing gate. Arrows struck the ground behind them. The dog carried the seal safely in his mouth. Together, they escaped into the mountains. At sunrise, they stood above the distant village. The magical seal was finally safe, and the journey home had begun. When the dog and cat returned, Keloğlan embraced them both. He took the seal carefully from the dog's mouth. The villagers gathered around him. Once again, the seal began to shine. The wells filled, the fields turned green, the trees blossomed. The vizier was brought before the king. His stolen riches disappeared, and he was punished for his greed. Keloğlan looked at the seal in his hands. He now understood something important. The seal had created miracles, but it had also brought envy and danger. He raised it toward the sky. I wish for kindness to remain in this land, and I wish that no one may use this power for greed again. The seal shone brighter than ever before. Then, a thin crack appeared across its surface. It broke into hundreds of tiny lights. The lights rose into the sky and scattered like stars. The voice of the Serpent King moved through the wind. True magic was never inside the seal. It lived inside the heart that chose mercy. Keloğlan returned to his simple home. He lived beside his mother, his loyal dog, and his clever cat. He was not remembered because he possessed a magical object. He was remembered because, even when he had very little, he chose to share. And from that day forward, whenever someone performed an act of kindness without expecting a reward, the wind carried the faint sound of an ancient seal, reminding the world that true magic never disappears. It simply passes from one kind heart to another.